Hello, you. Oh my god. I think that was super loud. Hello, you. Why am I peeking so bad? Hi, everybody. I'll get here eventually. Hello, welcome. Welcome, everybody. Hello, you. My name is Goddess Manami. Sorry, I can't keep up with the joke here. Okay. Excuse me as I adjust myself. Yeah, doing my best, Guru Larry. Yeah, you know it. Okay. Hi, how's everybody? Oh my god, my music's probably so loud. We'll turn that down a little bit. I'm also apparently so loud. It's great. Okay. Testing. That's the best way to test any. Oh god. Oh. Log files in my face. Wow! The sound alerts work again! Yay! Thank god. That was Alright. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Okay. Alright. Yeah, I was having a lot of issues. Thank you, Professor, for the redeem. Okay, alright, welcome. Welcome, everybody. This is a somewhat different than, I usually do. Normally when I'm reading here out of my storybook, it's, you know, my storybook, but, I couldn't finagle a book that was the book that I'm reading. So just imagine that I have the book inside the pages of my book here. The book over here, FullMetal Alchemist: A New Beginning, is what I'll actually do tonight. So, yeah, I figured, you know, do a little change of pace. I do like the read aloud stream. I even have a little book ASMR here. But yeah, you know, reading something legally published. I kind of like the whole reading aloud stream story time. So yeah, a little background. This is a light novel series for FullMetal Alchemist written by Makoto. From what I understand, not only approved by the creator of FullMetal Alchemist, but straight up, like, he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna draw some art for your book. You cool with that?" So, for a little trivia, for those of you who have seen the 2003 series of FullMetal Alchemist, that little segment in Zenitime, that's the name. Zenitime, you meet the Russell and Fletcher Tringham, the Tringham brothers. They were actually original characters, originated from this light novel series and adapted into the 2003 anime. So I thought that was a little fun trivia. So yeah, to a degree, like, the creator of the series was just like, "Hey, yo, this fanfiction's lit. I'm gonna draw art for it. I'm gonna put it in my anime." Oh, did I cut out when I said father? Hiromu Arakawa. Give me a moment. I'm having problems with Alright, is that better? Filters are being a pain in my butt lately. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, okay. I'm gonna try something totally crazy. You ready? Alright, I'll keep the limiter on, but I just straight up turned everything else. I'm gonna just turn myself up. La 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 la. Testing. Oh, wow. Okay. I don't. Yeah. What else is new though? Okay. I'll take that gain back. Alright, whoa. Gain is now suddenly too much. Okay. How about this? Am I blowing out your eardrums? Because I'm just at the point where, like, I'm gonna mute my mic and just listen for a sec. Hi Zilf! Hello everybody! Yeah, hopefully I'll sound okay. Yes, we are in the scuff portion of the stream, aka the beginning. Ho 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 ho. Ho ho hum. Okay. See how, it is 100% the noise gate. Hello? Alright, I think that's what I'm supposed to do. Testing, testing. Testing, testing, testing. To be able to hear my soft voice. Just in case I gotta get dramatic. Always better to do this at the start? Yup, exactly. I don't know how many of you are here right now. I'm gonna just guess 2 because Sylph and Professor are here in chat. Okay, scuff is good. It's just something to fix. Anyway, okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna turn my. It keeps saying I'm peeking. I hate it, but I'm gonna continue onward. So this is the newest, and I say newest translated installment because if I'm not mistaken, this book came out in Japanese, probably back in the early 2000s because that's when all of these books kind of came out. This is the 6th edition. But very recently, this book was translated, and, yeah, I'm trying to find a year here in, first published in Japan in 2007, so it took, what, 14 years? If I'm doing my math right, to translate and release this book out in the West, so, that's my excitement for the evening, so yeah. This is a decently, not a super long book. It is a light novel, but how many pages we got here? We got 268 pages. So, some obvious things. I'm not reading this whole thing in one night, but please, 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 let me know if you like this, because I would absolutely like to do more of this, if it's something that the viewers are interested in. But if you'd rather watch me play a video game, I mean, let me know that too. But, you know, I do play a lot of video games, and a lot of streamers play video games, so I'm kind of digging this new route that I'm going. So, hopefully you guys agree. And without further ado, I'm gonna lower my music out. I'm gonna mute that out, and I'm gonna just put on some the first search I could find, relaxing FullMetal Alchemist music. It may or may not tie into the story that I'm reading. Just it's background noise. Just leave it be. Let it happen. Very loud. I'm gonna turn it down just a smidge. Hopefully everyone can hear that okay. This is for Mo 3, so this is great. I'm gonna put that a little more. Alright. We got a sequel to The World Ends With You in the time it took them to officially translate this book. This one book. Alright, so here we go. FullMetal Alchemist, A New Beginning. Parched winds swept along the mountain range. Sunlight bathed the rocky terrain, producing a heat that made the air shimmer. This was the south of Amestris, where the town of Rush Valley lay. The town, having made a name for itself within Amestris for its steel industry, was frequented daily by travelers and merchants who came and left by way of steam locomotive. However, even the congested station temporarily regained a sense of peacefulness after each train departed. The station roof shadowed the deserted platform after one such departure. In a quarter of the platform, a lone girl spoke over a phone. Uh-huh, that's right. Ed and Al are going to Dublin. I'm about to head to the place I was told to apprentice at. The girl seemed familiar with whoever she was on the phone with. A smile occasionally flitted across her face as she spoke, her wide blue eyes blinking in delight, and her long blonde ponytail swaying. As she chatted away, her silver earrings glinted with all the bright charm that the girl herself emitted. Wearing those sparkling earrings and a short black skirt with a white camisole, she was the very image of a girl with a sunny disposition. Uh-huh. Yeah, I will. It'll be fine. You too, Granny. Okay then, I'll call you later. After smiling for the person on the other end of the receiver, the girl, Winry Rockbell, hung up the phone. I wonder how far their train has gone, Winry said, staring at the rails stretching out from the platform. The rails had carried the departing train she had just seen off. Next time, you can make me a better one of these. Those had been her childhood friend Edward's parting words to her as he leapt onto the train with his little brother, Alphonse. He had pointed at his arm as he spoke. Edward, whose right arm and leg were automail, and Alphonse, who had a suit of steel armor in place of a flesh-and-blood body, had started a journey several years prior in search of a way to regain their original bodies. Winry, an automail mechanic, had always supported the siblings from the sidelines. Ever since she lost her doctor parents when she was young, she had been raised by her grandmother Panaka, who was also an automail mechanic. Winry had been doing automail maintenance in her hometown, Risenbowl, for as long as she could remember. However, Winry was standing at a Rush Valley station at the moment, which was long from the place she had been born and raised. "Winry, how about we get going?" a voice called to her from the ticket gate. Panina, a friend from Rush Valley who had come with Winry to see Edward and Alphonse off, waved at her. The brothers were the reason Winry was in Rush Valley in the first place. She had wanted to improve her skills so that she could create a better automail in order to help them regain their original body. That got so loud! Bruh. Sorry, that distracted me. Okay. Yay, Shining Heart, you're here! It's story time! Juice Box, hello! I lost my place, excuse me. She had wanted to improve her skills so that she could create even better automail in order to help them regain their original bodies, even if just a day sooner. Because of that, she had decided to train in Rush Valley. She would be living a new life in an unfamiliar town and training away from family. From this point forward, everything would be a new experience. Black smoke rose high into the sky in the distance from where the rails traced a loose curve and disappeared into the mountainous terrain. A thought flitted through Winry's mind. Maybe that's the train they're on. The thought proved that she wasn't immune to melancholy, but the emotion faded quickly as she watched the smoke dissipate into the azure of the sky. In the melancholy's place, her chest overflowed with anticipation about what she would learn in the course of her apprenticeship. "All right, time for me to get to work too," she encouraged herself. Then, with a skip in her step, Winry headed over to the ticket gate where Panina waited. Whoa, that's bright! The blinding sunlight south of Amestris was known for welcomed Winry as she left the station. When she raised her hand to her forehead to block out the sun's rays and see where she was going, she was able to make out a towering, bare rock face. The mountains encircling Rush Valley contained a wealth of mineral deposits. Traces of mining scarred the rock faces, but the ores within had yet to be exhausted. Though those ores had many uses, in this town where they were primarily used for prosthetics. With the exception of assisted devices that supported physical movement, limb replacement prosthetics were divided into two broad categories. One was automail, a type of prosthesis that the user had full control of through the electrical impulses of their terminal nerve endings. The other consisted of ordinary artificial limbs made from steel and wood. Because of a large-scale civil war that had broken out nearly a decade prior, prosthetics engineering had advanced, which had brought about Rush Valley's rapid expansion into a large town. The town, hailed as the boom town of the broken down and the mechanics' mecca, was packed with rows of prosthetic shops. Studios had even been built in the cramped flat spaces that were few and far in between within the surrounding rugged mountains. The streets overflowed with boisterous crowds. Clouds. Their voices making a general hubbub. Panina, a Rush Valley native, slipped through the throng with learned ease. She turned to look back at Winry. "You left your stuff at the hotel, right? How about we grab that before heading to the shop?" "Okay, let's please do that." Sorry. I don't know if I'm... Sorry, 'tis the season for spookies, but I'm hearing strange noises and I got a little scared. Okay, it stopped. So I think everything's okay. Kinda scared me for a second. Okay. Can you guys hear the music okay? I feel like I'm gonna be DJing this video as we go along here. Okay. There's a shortcut over here. Panina, who had volunteered to lead Winry to her apprenticeship, put her hands together behind her back and lightly skipped forward. Both her legs were automail and, unknown to observers, contained a cannon and a blade. Her automail, which required a skilled hand to create, had been made by Dominic, the man who had introduced Winry to the place where she would be studying. Rush Valley was teeming with other mechanics just as fantastically skilled as Dominic. Those very mechanics were flourishing their wrenches in front of their shop to show off, occasionally shouting solicitations. "Welcome, welcome! The junk shop is having a sale for a limited time only!" You, sir, passing by. Won't you trade up to the latest in automail? I'll whip up any order you can think of. We'll give you free estimates. We even offer loans. Automail and run-off-the-mill prosthetics shops weren't the only offerings. There were junk shops and loan establishments, as well as painters making a living by creating signs for the businesses. Any way you looked at it, the town revolved around prosthetics. As a matter of course, the customers gathered in droves. They came from all over Amestris to haggle in front of the shops, stipulate their orders to the mechanics in great detail, and obtain the prosthetics of their dreams. The entire town of Rush Valley buzzed with the enthusiasm of both the buyers and the sellers. Wow. Though Winry had walked through the town with Edward and Alphonse before, she was once again overcome by the passionate energy filling the place. Struck with admiration, she was swept away by the crowd she had yet to grow accustomed to. Several kids ran past her. "Miss! Out of the way! Out of the way!" "Oh, sorry." Winry quickly dodged them. When she looked at where they were headed, she saw a crowd forming in a vacant lot. She glanced over to see a weightlifting competition in progress between people with automail arms. Bets were being taken on the strength of each participant's automail. The event felt like a natural fit for a town that revolved around automail, and the lot was bustling with spectating children, contestants waiting their turn, and mechanics waiting for an opportunity to coax the losers into having their broken-down arms serviced at their shops. "Whoa, what kind of material do you think automail sheathing is made from?" "I think that automail sheathing is made from," Winry pondered, slowing down to take in the fascinating scene. While trying to catch a glimpse of the competition through the gaps in the crowd, she felt something abruptly bump into her. Ah! Oh! A boy, about 12 or 13 years old, had run into her. The boy had apparently been distracted by the competition too, and hadn't noticed Winry passing right in front of him when he stepped out from the side road. They'd barely run into each other, but the impact had sent the boy reeling backward. "Oh, careful!" When Winry shot out her hand to catch him, she saw a crutch nestled under the boy's left armpit, and a prosthesis peeking out from the right leg of his green shorts. A kind-looking woman, who seemed to be his mother, immediately ran up to him from behind. "I'm so sorry. Apparently he wasn't looking where he was going. You're not injured, are you?" said the woman, bowing her head apologetically. She wore a dress and a cropped jacket and carried a small sleeping girl on her back. "I'm okay. I was distracted too. I'm sorry. Did you get hurt?" Winry asked, feeling guilty for her inattentiveness. The boy shook his head. "I'm sorry for running into you too," he murmured, then pulled away from Winry's hand, which had been keeping him steady. He adjusted the crutch and left. The woman bowed and followed after the boy. "You didn't want to look at the shops on that street?" the woman asked. "No." "Really? Then let's find other good places to go." The sound of their conversation and the crutch hitting the hard ground slowly faded away. When Winry looked down at the road that the boy had come from, she saw a line of many shops sporting large signs and boards featuring sales pitches. The boy had likely been looking for a place that could service his prosthetic leg, or replace it with automail. "What's up? Did you want to make a stop at one of the shops?" asked Paninia. She'd been walking ahead of Winry, but had backtracked when Winry had trailed significantly behind. "Not really." After Winry drew her attention away from the side street, she quickly caught up to Paninia. A winning point of Rush Valley was the abundance of businesses that customers could choose from. Winry was sure the boy would find a good shop of his own. On the other hand, it was a tough world for the vendors, but that was why mechanics wouldn't forego any effort to stand out. Friendly rivalry had incentivized the town to flourish, which meant that studying here would fully immerse a mechanic in state-of-the-art techniques. There was no better place Winry could have chosen to go improve her skills. As Winry's spirits mounted, she asked Paninia, who walked next to her, about the place she would be training at. "So, what's Atelier Garfield like?" Right. Paninia put her pointer finger up to her chin and gave a thoughtful look in reaction to Winry's brimming curiosity. "I've never gotten service there, but based on how it looks from the outside..." Paninia seemed to recall something as she held her finger up and grinned. "It's a real jaw-dropper, I suppose." "A jaw-dropper? How?" "You'll know once you get there." Paninia suppressed a laugh. She cast a sidelong glance at Winry, who looked dubious, as she quickly walked ahead. "Oh, wait up!" Winry followed after Paninia, puzzling over her words. According to Dominic, the place she was going to had wanted help as soon as they could get it. They'd accepted her with open arms. In that case, she could only assume it was a jaw-droppingly busy shop, or that they would demand jaw-dropping quality from her. Regardless of which it was, the skills she'd acquired through studying there would be certain to make the jaws drop at home. When she thought about it like that, Winry got a spring in her step. After she collected her things from the hotel, her heart was aflutter with anticipation as she and Panina headed to the shop. After a 20-minute walk, Panina announced, "This is it!" When Panina grinned and pointed out a building, Winry's eyes went wide. She beheld a gigantic, nay, mammoth, sign. She'd seen several other signs outfitted with flashy lights or twisted bits of steel on the way. She'd even seen establishments featuring bold writing and slogans boasting about their techniques. However, the sign in front of her eyes was nothing like any of those. The sign that read, Adelier Garfield, was written with script, attenuated here and there by charming roses and leaves. An even larger rose had been painted next to the studio's name. To top it off, it was all in pink. Flowing green curves had been used to represent the vines that complemented the flower. The petals blooming on the sign were beautifully set off by 2 leaves that were detailed down to their veins. Because of its elegant and cutesy design, Winry had almost mistaken the workshop for a florist. Whoa! Winry's jaw nearly dropped. Between the earthen tones of the mountains, the dull luster of the automail, and the abundance of male mechanics, Rush Valley had a somewhat rough-and-tumble image, yet here was a single rose blooming in the center of the town, a truly jaw-dropping sight. See? It's jaw-dropping, right? Well, good luck! I'll come by to let you know when I've found some work, too, Panina gave Winry, who was half in a daze, a pat of encouragement on the back. Yeah, thank you. Good luck to you, too, Panina. After she watched Panina nimbly dash off, Winry stood under the sign of the garage-like studio. She peered into the shop in the hopes of greeting the owner, but it seemed that she had arrived right at rush hour. Several customers were waiting their turn, and she couldn't figure out who this Garfield character was. Mr. Dominic sent me here to apprentice? I'm Winry Rockbell, she yelled into the shop, somewhat loudly. A rugged voice, about half an octave higher than she expected, responded. Just a moment, please. It seemed that Garfield was further back in the studio, likely in another room. She heard from Dominic that the proprietor was a man, but the shop seemed dainty and almost had a feminine atmosphere. Based on that, Winry simply assumed that Garfield would be a thin and petite, androgynous man. Eventually, a figure appeared from the very back of the shop. Sorry for the wait. A beaming man came out, wiping his oil-smeared hands as he made his way over to her. He was giant, hulking even, with a heavy helping of hair on his arms and chest. He had paired a black tank top with black pants and suspenders. He also sported a mustache and a beard. His short hair was cropped slightly to his head, but his sideburns made neat curls on his cheeks. No matter what angle she looked at him from, the rugged, unquestionably masculine man was the polar opposite of the rosy sign and the gender-neutral image she had assumed. There was one aspect of him that did seem androgynous to Winry, if she had to comment. Those were his pursed red lips. It almost looked as though he was wearing lipstick. When she looked more closely, it seemed he indeed was wearing lipstick. The man placed his hand on his mouth and said in a rough but elegant voice, Oh my, are you Winry? Why, what a cute girl you are! I'm Garfield, the owner of this shop. It's so very nice to meet you. She could almost hear him follow up his remark with a girlish heart. He also winked. For a moment, Winry was so captivated by his elegant and charming mannerisms that she was rendered speechless. But she came back to her senses and quickly bowed. It's nice to meet you. Flustered, Winry had to admit that Garfield, the studio's proprietor, was a real jaw-dropper. Woohoo! And that was the first chapter. Alright, so, real talk. I had read the first chapter, like, on my own time. So, all of that I knew, but from here, going forward, I have not read any of this yet. So, take a sip of water, but if I make any, if I stumble over my words, it's because I'm doing it live! Alrighty. So Chapter 2, The Daily Hustle and Bustle of Rush Valley. Early morning saw the first train pull into the Rush Valley station. Winry opened her eyes to the sound of the train's brakes echoing off the surrounding mountains. She was in the room she had been given for her stay, which was on the second floor of Atelier Garfield. Unexplored territory, yes. Despite the morning gloom lingering outside, Winry sprang out of her bed to open the window. She then headed to the small sink in the corner of the room and scrubbed briskly at her face to rid herself of any remaining drowsiness. She took out a cropped tank top and pulled it over her head before slipping into a jumpsuit, whose sleeves she tied snugly around her waist. To complete her work outfit, she pulled her hair up into a ponytail, then topped off the look with a bandana wrapped around her head. After getting dressed, Winry raced down the stairs and straight through the deserted studio. The place would fill with people once the business opened, but at the moment it was silent. She walked up to the shutters facing the main road and placed her hand on their handle. Up we go! She heaved up the heavy shutters with a grunt. This had become one of her daily routines since coming to live at Atelier Garfield. A rush of refreshing morning air swept into the studio as the shutters rose. Though the city was sweltering during the day, the heat would fade at night, so that dawn was accompanied by a cool breeze. Looks like it'll be clear skies again today, Winry stretched, and then took a deep breath before she dove into preparing for the day. She dusted off the various electric machines, then swept and wiped down the floors. Next, she took the smaller tools used for more delicate components and arranged them by size for use of the table off to the side. She took blueprints out of an oblong box by the wall so that they would be ready for the clients coming that day, and placed some automail pieces still wrapped in cloth on the workbench in preparation for fixing them first thing in the morning. Setup alone made Winry's forehead break out into a light sweat because there was so much to do, given their many clients and the large assortment of tools they worked with. Now, all that's left is to light the furnace. Wiping her sweat away using the sleeve of her jumpsuit, Winry sat in front of the furnace in the studio's corner and lit it with a match. The furnace was an indispensable tool for crafting automail. It was used to soften the metal plates, used as the exterior for automail, and for welding. Winry monitored the flames until they began to dance on the stacked logs before bringing several metal plates over to the furnace. Just as the studio was finally prepared so they could dive into work, Garfield peeked inside. "Morning, Winry dear! Why don't we have breakfast soon?" "Good morning, Mr. Garfield." Garfield stepped into the studio after his cheerful greeting, but paused to stare intently at Winry's face. He then let out a deep sigh. "Your skin's so lovely today, as always. It's positively radiant, my dear. It must be so nice to be young." "Mr. Garfield, you always look beautiful too," Winry replied. "My, you certainly know how to charm, but even if it's just empty flattery, it's still nice to hear." At this point, Winry was used to Garfield's mannerism of placing his hand daintily on his cheek. Garfield would insist she had just been flattering him, but Winry meant every word. He would never appear unshaven in public after having overslept, nor would he allow any poor health decisions to affect his skin. He was immaculate when it came to both his health and his clothes, and he likewise kept his work area free of needless clutter. Despite that, he didn't shirk from getting his hands dirty, and when he was busy, he would become more grease-stained than anyone. From her place at his side, Winry found she admired Garfield's ability to maintain a lifestyle that balanced hard work with taking care of himself and his appearance. They had a simple breakfast of coffee that Garfield prepared, along with soup and bread. As they ate, the sun's rays began streaming through the window. Smoke rose from the chimneys of businesses in the distance, and they could hear the scattered sounds of shutters and windows opening. They even heard some metal beginning to clang. "Now then, why don't we begin as well? Let's make the most out of today, my dear." "Let's!" Winry gulped down the rest of her coffee, savoring the joy of being here, where she would immerse herself in tinkering with her beloved automail to her heart's content. Clients started pouring into Atelier Garfield as soon as it opened. They didn't go out of their way to attract clients, but people were drawn to the shop anyway, apparently attracted by the reputation of the proprietor. "Excuse me, I heard this store does custom automail? Could you take a look at my shoulder? The place that made it is taking a holiday." There were all kinds of customers, those coming in for their first automail, those requesting designs for upgrades, and those looking to adjust the automail they already had. As the clients' voices filled the store, Winry flitted around on light feet, following Garfield's orders. "Winry, darling, can you screw out this outer plate, and then if you could handle the repair for that customer over there?" "Got it!" "We still have some of that metal plating we got in the other day, don't we? If you could be a dear and cut those into shape number 58 from this blueprint. Oh, and Mr. Cass came by, so do make sure to take his requests." "Got it! Working on it!" There was no break in the stream of clients, with several always waiting on standby on the bench or on chairs to the side of the studio. Despite the studio's popularity, Garfield and Winry were the only ones working there. Winry heard that Garfield had managed by himself for a long time, and occasionally had local mechanic friends come try to help. But the work had recently become too overwhelming for him to manage alone. and he had confessed to Dominic that he could use some help. That was how Winry came to be volunteered as another hand who could hit the ground running. Garfield usually handled long-time regulars and new clients who required designs made from scratch, but Winry often took charge of the walk-ins requesting repairs or adjustments. When things got busy, she jotted down requests from regulars and even drew out the roughs for their blueprints. At first, Winry floundered a little, faced with a new environment, advanced tools she wasn't used to, and types of prosthetics she'd never seen before. But it wasn't long before her positive personality and ability to learn on her feet kicked in, and now she could do everything at a brisk pace. "Thanks for waiting, Mr. Cass. What would you like today?" Winry approached a gentleman who had gotten automail for both of his legs at Atelier Garfield a few years prior. She held his chart at the ready. "Well, hello there. Tell you the truth, my legs have started to feel heavier as I've gotten older. I thought it would be nice to get something lighter, even if it's just for the plates of my knees. I would appreciate something more on the affordable side." Cass rested both of his hands on the cane planted before his chair. He had prioritized durability when he had his kneecaps made, but as a result, they were quite thick. Winry pulled out Cass's blueprints from the back of the studio and checked the measurements for his knee and the surrounding areas. She then thought about what could be used to make an acceptable, lighter replacement. "If you could please give me a moment." Winry ducked into the small back room, a finger on her chin as she thought. She then pulled out a single sheet of metal from the materials box before returning to the studio. "How do you feel about this?" Winry asked. The metal plate she'd brought to him was a sample manufactured by a company that processed and sold ores. Atelier Garfield offered custom prosthetics made from alloys blended according to their clients' specifications, but it could be pricey. However, they also used mass-market materials produced by steel manufacturers, which they could offer at a far more affordable rate. This is relaxing music, but a lot of it's sad. I'm gonna take a second to have a sippy. Okay. This is a brand new product that only recently came out in the market. It's got a fair price point and is incredibly lightweight, Winry explained. She gave a quote for the price and scheduled they need if they moved ahead with the metal. Cass stroked his white beard while nodding along with interest. It was difficult to get a hold of new materials like this out in the country, such as places like Grisenbull. However, in Rush Valley, the mecca of prosthetics, the companies themselves came to sell their products. This allows mechanics to select and offer their customers the best options from a vast selection of materials. Winry was delighted that her current environment allowed her such luxuries, and she eagerly recommended the new materials that she had learned about. "This material is a little prone to rusting, so you'll have to change your maintenance routine, but it will be considerably lighter from the automail you currently have," Winry explained. "Well, that's very nice. I'm a little worried about the different maintenance, but..." Cass took some time to think about it, lifting and stroking the sample metal plate. The more he heard about the positives of the material, the more his concerns seemed to ease. "It must be good if you're so confident in telling me about it. Well then, I'd like to go with this." "Understood, sir." Winry took measurements of each part of Cass's body, jotting them down on his chart before giving him an estimate on when the blueprint would be finished. She then gave his weathered automail a complimentary polish. She helped Cass to the street as he walked out with his cane, and then she turned to the clients waiting within the studio. "Apologies for the wait! Who's next?" A young girl raised her hand. Her name was Melia, and she'd already come by multiple times for maintenance. As Winry pulled out Melia's chart and went over to her, she saw worry on the girl's face, and guessed why the girl had come. Winry's brows furrowed slightly. "Hello, Melia. Is your foot acting up again?" "Yeah. No matter what I do, it just doesn't feel right." Melia looked uncertain as she sat on the bench, shifting her leg forward to show a piece of automail that started at her ankle. The automail sparkled, reflecting the light in the room. It was relatively new, and had only been fitted last month, but Melia had already come in several times to get adjustments done by Winry after feeling that it wasn't working properly. "Alright, I'll take another look at it," Winry said. "First, please move it as I direct you to." Winry sat on the floor and pulled a screwdriver out of her toolkit to remove the automail's outer plating. She then brought her face closer and tracked the movements of all the visible parts and cylinders. 1, 2, 3. Next, rotate your ankle. Winry had Amelia move her toes and ankles and watched closely to see how the automail had responded. I can't see any particular problems, but... Winry pulled out a stick with a small mirror attached to its tip and inserted it into the automail to observe the pistons of the cylinders from every angle. As she worked, Amelia spoke up hesitantly from overhead. Hey, Winry? If you removed my foot, could you take a really close look at it, right? Could you do that for me? Winry hummed as she inspected the device that intercepted electric signals again, just to be sure it was functioning properly. Excuse me as I turn down the music. It's like actually too loud for me. While it was true that it was easier to work on the automail if it was removed from the limb, reattaching it was incredibly painful for the wearer. There wasn't any way around doing so if the automail was damaged or needed to be resized, but Winry was reluctant to needlessly inflict pain on someone when she didn't know what the cause of the trouble was. After reaffirming that nothing was amiss, Winry pulled up her tools out from the automail and replaced the outer plating. She then looked up at Amelia, who was leaning over her. When you upgrade your automail, it can take some time to get used to it. The parts that intercept electric signals perform differently, and the materials and weight of the automail itself are different too. A lot of people feel a pretty big change compared to what they were using before. I think that's what you're experiencing, but what do you think? The girl cocked her head before giving a little nod. Now that you mention it, it feels weirdly light when I move. And I think that might have been bothering me too. Winry's explanation had been easy to understand, and gave Amelia a possible culprit for her discomfort. If there wasn't anything for me to fiddle with, my taking off your foot will just hurt a lot. I'd like to keep an eye on things for a little longer. If things are still bad afterward, we'll remove it and take a proper look at it then. Winry placed a comforting hand on Amelia's knee. The gentleness of her touch and voice eased Amelia's fears that her automail was broken, and the girl relaxed. Yeah, I see. I think I might have been too paranoid, Amelia said. I'm sorry I keep bugging you about it. I know you're busy. Don't worry about it. I don't want you to feel you need to hold anything back. You can come to me with anything. Be careful on your way back. Amelia looked apologetic at taking up Winry's time when she hadn't even needed any maintenance, but Winry saw the girl off with a reassuring smile to show that she didn't mind. From behind her, she heard another customer call out. Winry, could you come take a look at this for me? Yes, I'm coming! Winry didn't even have time to catch her breath, but she never voiced a single complaint. She spoke to clients with a smile on her face, handling repairs and maintenance jobs alike. Garfield approached Winry's work ethic, and in return, he found time to teach her new skills. Winry, darling, if you could come over here, Garfield delicately beckoned Winry over as he repaired the automail arm in front of arm of one of his regulars. You've never seen this shape before, have you? We don't get it too often nowadays, but it was invented by a mechanic from West City in the 1890s. We have other regulars who wear this style, so make sure you remember it. Something to look out for when working with it is that it has slightly thicker support that makes it easier for them to rub against other parts and wear down. When that happens, look here. When Winry came and stood next to Garfield, he shifted his body back and to the side to allow her a clear view of what he was doing. He then opened the outer plating on the customer's upper arm and used a screwdriver to point at one of the components that was creaking loudly. You can file down this part here, or replace it with another thinner but sturdy component. It's important to be generous with the oil, too, Garfield explained, while inserting a tool between the machine parts for confident hands, swapping out what he needed to. He then used an eyedropper to apply oil. The client flexed their fingers, and the cylinders moved smoothly and soundlessly. You can do this on other automail joints too, when they malfunction, Garfield added. Got it. Winry focused all of her attention on Garfield's hand as he shared his wisdom freely. Winry felt her chest swell with so much joy she could almost burst. Every day since coming to Rush Valley, she had the opportunity to touch prosthetics she'd never seen before, and was taught new skills, and even given more knowledge. Let me take a sip of water real quick. I feel my voice doing that thing. Make sure you hydrate, kids. Oh, thank you. I have a cup. I could drink out of my cup. I have to... Take a sippy. Alright. My 90s cup. Okay, okay. I wanted to finish the paragraph, but I stopped in the middle of it. Okay. Everything she gained was reflected in how she worked with clients and in the blueprints for Edward's automail up in her room. She wanted to learn more. She wanted to improve her skills. With those desires in mind, these busy days, which could have been exhausting for Winry, were instead filled with joy. Winry never forgot her love of learning while she worked, which helped her rapidly improve. It still wasn't enough, and whenever she had a spare moment, she continued to study, further polishing her skills. Later on the same day she'd looked at Melia's foot, Winry snatched some downtime between clients to practice cutting metal sheets. Let's see. When using this tool to cut metals with a higher ratio of chrome, I need to use the guide rail to keep it from curving. Like this. Winry sat in front of the power tool and placed a scrap of metal against its teeth. This kind of machinery was essential for making automail, and Winry had experience with a different model. The machine at the studio was larger and more precise, which also meant that it was more sensitive to even the subtlest movements made by its user, making it harder to control. If she let up pressure even in the slightest, the teeth would grind to a halt. But pushing too hard would mean it wouldn't cut evenly along the curve, leaving jagged edges. Winry was having a hard time getting the machine to work with her. Concentrate, Winry murmured, and took a deep breath. She was surrounded by stacks of crates filled with their last shipment of materials, which created an isolated space perfect for sharpening her focus. I almost turned 2 pages instead of 1. When she switched on the machine, the low drone of its motor accompanied vibrations she felt through her hand while holding the metal plate steady. Careful not to let the vibrations overwhelm her, she held her breath and focused on her fingertips as she rotated the sheet. The blade and the metal ground harshly as they met, even as a graceful arc appeared on the sheet. Winry pushed the sheet until she could no longer feel resistance from the blade. Then she carefully removed it from the machine table. The machine had responded to her. With anticipation, she lifted the piece she had cut out. She was thrilled when she saw the shape she had intended. Yes! She gave a little fist pump. Oh my! Well done! Winry didn't know how long he had been there, but Garfield was peeking at her from between the stacked crates. You did an excellent job handling that machine. Now let's see it. Garfield accepted the plate and took a good look at it before sliding his finger along the curved edge. Lovely! My finger doesn't even snag on the edge. It's perfect. Really? Yes! Thank you! Winry clutched her hands together at her chest, openly overjoyed, and Garfield stared, not bothering to hide at how impressed he was. You know, you've come a really long way in such a short time. At this rate, you could be fine being in charge of your own clients, Garfield said as he leaned forward, bringing his face at Winry's level. Right now, we've got a 12-year-old boy in the shop. You mentioned having made automail for a boy around that age, no? This is a great opportunity. Would you like to manage his case? Me? Manage? Are you sure? Winry was surprised by the unexpected offer. And this music's too loud. Just push. I think I just turned it right back to where it was, so I'll do that. I lost my spot. Winry was surprised by the unexpected offer, and also a little uncertain. As an automail mechanic, she was pleased by the prospect of overseeing a client. Music. Please, music. How I roll. Anyway. I lost my spot again. As an automail mechanic, she was pleased by the prospect of overseeing a client and personally handling their case from the design to the creation of the automail. At the same time, she had been told at the start of her apprenticeship that she would be doing nothing but drafting, maintenance, and repairs for a while. Noticing her hesitancy, Garfield's face suddenly broke out into a kind smile. It would have been stressful for you to manage a client before getting used to your surroundings and tools, but you've completely mastered my tools now, and you've gained quite a bit of knowledge too. You'll be fine. Mr. Garfield. Winry realized that Garfield had been looking out for her to ensure that she wouldn't push herself or fail to take care of her own health after arriving in Rush Valley. She felt a belated swell of gratitude at his laid-back watchfulness for her well-being. Of course, in the end, it's up to you. What do you say? He asked. When he raised his eyebrows teasingly, Winry realized that she hadn't accepted his offer yet, and hastily raised her hand. Yes, I'll do my best. Please let me do it! Winry stood up so suddenly that her chair clattered, and Garfield nodded, satisfied. Your constant enthusiasm is one of your loveliest charms. The boy I'm entrusting you to is over there. Good luck! Looking where Garfield had directed, Winry saw a group of waiting adult clients and a noticeably younger boy sitting among them. This boy was to be the first client that Winry would manage at Rush Valley. Reigning in her joy and excitement, Winry dusted off the metal shavings that still clung to her person. She prepared one of the blank charts they used for brand new customers, straightened herself, and then approached the boy. Hello there, Winry called out, even more cheerfully than usual. The boy was sitting, his head tilted downward. He looked slightly annoyed as he raised his head. Wait a sec, Winry said. He looked slightly familiar. The same thought apparently crossed the boy's mind. His brows furrowed, as though he were trying to remember something. They simultaneously reached the same conclusion. We've met before. She knew that black hair cropped short, his dark eyes veiled with gloom. He was on the smaller side, and he wore a white t-shirt with green knee-length shorts. It was the boy Winry had collided with on the first day of her apprenticeship. He had been looking for a prosthetic shop then, and it appeared he had yet to find one. The boy was accompanied by his mother. The girl who had been sleeping on the mother's back the last time Winry saw them was awake today and standing on her own, her brother's crutch gripped firmly in her hand. Hello, I'm Karen Harling. Karen, the mother. Of course her name's Karen. Sorry. Just break that immersion for a second to be like, oh, of course it's Karen. Hold on. Oh. Alright, now the music's too quiet. I love this whole DJing thing I have to do. There we go. Hello, I'm Karen Harling. Karen, the mother, bowed her head. Her brown, shoulder-length hair bobbed with the movement. I'm terribly sorry about the other day. I see you're a mechanic. Yes, I am. I apologize for the other day as well. Am I correct in assuming that you're here today to make an automail order for your son? Yes, we're looking to get custom-made automail for my son's right leg, but, he... Karen turned her tawny eyes to the silent boy, but he didn't notice, as he was once again staring at his own feet. I'm sorry. His name is Darish. Thank you for meeting with him. At the sound of Karen introducing him, Darish hastily raised his head. Apparently it wasn't that he wasn't paying attention, he had just been lost in thought. Winry didn't let his attitude bother her, and she bent at the waist and extended her hand. I'm Winry. I'm the mechanic in charge of your automail. It's a pleasure to meet you. But Darish only glanced at her hand and didn't take it. It's not like we've decided on this place, he said coldly, turning his face away from the hand presented to him. Darish! Karen's voice held reproach this time. Winry, however, simply smiled at Darish and withdrew her hand. That's all right. You haven't put on a formal request yet, after all. I'll take your measurements to start, give you a quote, then draw up some blueprints for your plates. Then you can make a decision. Hi, Zen! Welcome! After all, there were many businesses in Rush Valley. Clients were free to choose which places to patronize. All Winry could do was give it her best. For now, I'm going to start taking your measurements, alright? Winry said as she pulled a tape measure out of her pocket and knelt at Darish's feet. Doing that brought her exactly to eye level with the girl standing nearby who was holding the crutch. Their eyes met. Surrounded by unfamiliar people and tools, the girl's eyes were wide, and Winry felt as though she were being sucked into the pupil's dark depths. The girl's black hair curled gently around her shoulders, and a white bow perched atop her head. She wore a sky-blue dress embroidered with small flowers along the hem that were to the little girl's taste. Aw, thank you for her pat! Oh, wow! The crutch was about as tall as she was, and threatened to topple her over, yet the girl hugged it to herself with both arms. Winry paused, her hands still extended and holding the tape measure. She gave the girl a smile. Hello. What's your name? The girl, who up to now had been excluded, immediately perked up upon being spoken to. Her face lit up with a smile as she enthusiastically answered, Letty! Little Letty, is it? And how old are you? I'm 6. I'm a grown-up, the girl said, apparently displeased at being spoken to like a small child. Her petite mouth scrunched into an adorable pout. Stand to give you the head pat. Can you hold on to that crutch while I speak with your mother and brother? Uh-huh, I sure can. Holding a large, heavy crutch for an extended time should have been tough on the 6-year-old, but Letty apparently believed that doing so was her duty to her brother. She hugged it even closer. Winry wasn't the only one who couldn't hold in a smile at the sight of the girl's adorable bravery, and chuckles escaped from the other clients waiting nearby. It only took a moment for the peaceful mood in their little corner of the studio to shatter. Don't bother with the crutch. You can just toss it somewhere over there, Darius said nastily. I told you, you didn't need to come. You're just gonna get sleepy and conk out in the middle of things anyway. He didn't even give Letty a glance as he said the cold words. The girl's face crumpled. Sob. Her eyes began to glisten. Then enormous droplets welled up and fell from her cheeks. Why did you have to be so mean to her? Oh, Letty, don't cry, their mother lamented. Karen quickly pulled a handkerchief out of her pocket and wiped Letty's cheeks. The girl's sobs rang through the entire shop, drawing the eyes of Garfield and the other shocked clients towards Winry and the family. Darish apparently hadn't expected Letty to throw such a big fuss. He tisked out of annoyance. None too gently, he snatched the crutch from his little sister and leaned it against the wall. Mom, you can take Letty and go back to the hotel. Her crying's gonna bother the other people in the shop. I'm fine by myself. But we need to talk about your leg, Karen said, looking torn as she tried to soothe Letty. Discussions about procedures and fees couldn't move forward without the presence of an adult. At the same time, if Letty continued to cry, it might bother others in the shop. Don't worry about it, Winry said. Meanwhile, Darish ignored the sobbing and faced any direction but toward his little sister. Winry could guess from his attitude that fights like this were common between the siblings. All we're doing today is taking measurements and then jotting down requests for his automail, so Darish should be able to provide those. Karen still looked torn between her concern for her children and her concern for those in the shop, but at Winry's suggestion, she quickly, if hesitantly, started to leave the studio. Winry, I'm so sorry. Darish isn't very open in some ways. I'm sorry if he causes trouble for you, but I entrust him to your care. Bothering customers never stop people from letting their kids keep crying in our world. Right? Imagine caring what others think. Sippy time. Something I'm realizing with these reading streams is that, like, I need to take frequent breaks and frequent sips of water. It's weird. Where did I go? Okay. Karen kept bobbing her head in gratitude and apology as Winry showed her out. I'll come by again. The harried... Oh, hello, loud music. Jesus. So loud. Very happy music for a kid being, like, the biggest brat. I'll come by again, the harried mother promised before disappearing. When Winry turned back to the studio, she saw that Darish hadn't even looked up at his mother and sister's departure, and was instead stroking the attachment of his leg prosthetic. Winry didn't know why he had snapped so harshly at his little sister, who was still so young, but she certainly didn't approve. At the same time, she wasn't about to scold a boy she just met, especially since she didn't know the reasons behind his action. For now, she decided to continue her task and resettled herself at Darish's feet. Well then, kiddo, how about those leg measurements now? It's Darish. I'm not a kid like my sister, Darish muttered, unhappy with receiving the same treatment. Got it. Then you can just call me Winry, she answered, before falling into silence. Most of the clients who visited Atelier Garfield were friendly, and Winry often enjoyed having a pleasant back and forth while she worked. But Darish's posture was stiff, and everything that came out of his mouth was cold and blunt. The rest of the studio filled with cheerful chatter between Garfield and his clients, as well as between the regulars, but silence reigned between Winry and Darish. Winry wouldn't lie and say it was comfortable, but work was still work. She focused on the task at hand to distract her from the heavy mood and took measurements for the boy's instep, the size of his kneecap, the placement of his hip bone. She jotted the measurements down on the paper on her clipboard, then removed the belt holding Darish's current prosthetic in order to check its specifications. Sorry, just gonna take a look at this. Darish's prosthetic attached above the knee and was mostly made of a hard wooden material. Metal rods at its joints allowed some limited movement. The prosthetic was affixed to the stump of his thigh with a leather belt and metal fixtures. When Winry removed the tightly cinched belt, she observed that the skin in contact with the prosthetic was bruised purple. Darish, you're 12, right? You look like you've been growing, and the size of the prosthetic isn't quite right. When did you get this made? 2 years ago, Darish responded, sounding bored, which made Winry frown slightly. Darish was in his growth period, and his arms and legs looked like they weren't the right length for his age. There was no way a prosthetic from 2 years ago could still have fit him. Winry placed her hand on his left leg and slowly repeated the motions of bending it at the knee and stretching it. She then stood up and circled around to his back, and from over his shirt felt along his spine and hip bone. She could feel that something was off through the contact of her palms. She wasn't a doctor, but she had enough experience to know that the bones at the base of his right leg, the one with the prosthetic, weren't in the right place. His ill-fitting prosthetic was hurting the leg it attached to, which caused him to compensate by adjusting his posture, placing extreme pressure on the base of his other leg. If he didn't get a replacement that fit him soon, his pain wouldn't be limited to just his right leg, but likely his left leg and his hips as well. Winry placed the detached prosthetic on her workbench, and in an attempt to alleviate even a slight amount of Darish's pain, she adjusted the belt and its metal fastenings before fitting it back onto him. It looks like the prosthetic doesn't fit, so we should get you new automail as soon as possible. Can you tell me what you're looking for? Winry pulled over a chair with a round seat from a corner of the studio and settled it in front of Darish before sitting down. She placed his chart on her lap, ready to start their discussion, when Darish's head suddenly turned down. What's wrong? Winry asked. Darish remained silent, even as Winry peered at his face, the tip of her pen still resting against a blank line on the chart, ready to take requests. Darish stared down at his prosthetic, his lips tightly sealed. Winry knew that, if nothing else, she needed to get his request for automail, or she wouldn't be able to proceed. She refocused and tried again, keeping her voice light. For now, can you start with telling me about the kind of automail you're looking for? For example, do you want something light or something flexible? I'll make a draft based on your request, and then we'll look over it together and keep working on it until we have a link you're happy with. She was met with continued silence. Do you have any requests? Winry pressed. After being urged to respond several times, Darish finally answered, I don't. Alright, then let me start with what I recommend. I'll bring over some materials, Winry replied. Darish seemed like he had been in Rush Valley for a while, so Winry had assumed that he had seen plenty of automail and already had some ideas in mind. Apparently he hadn't. When the client didn't have any requests, mechanics often offered suggestions based on the client's body and needs. Too loud music wrong. Here we go. But before Winry could rise to find something she could show as an example, Darish stood up. I'm leaving, he said, as he snatched the crutch from where it leaned against the wall and shoved it under his arm. What? You're leaving? Why? Winry froze in shock, still in the process of standing up, but Darish used this crutch to swiftly make his way out of the shop. Hey! Please wait! Winry chased after Darish and slid in front of him to partially block his path. We haven't even begun talking about the automail. If you leave now, I won't be able to start drafting a design. There was no point going to an automail shop and not talking about automail, but Darish became even more, oh wow, that's a word, recalcitrant? I've never seen this word in my life. Recalcitrant. His lips barely moved as he forced out a murmur, saying, Who cares about automail? Huh? Winry didn't have the chance to ask what he meant. Darish thrust his crutch forward, shoving Winry to the side, and proceeded to leave for real. Winry could tell from the way he moved that even if she chased him, he wouldn't stop for her. Dumbfounded, she watched him go. All she could do was call after him with the, Please come by again tomorrow! To herself, she muttered, I wonder what I did wrong. What a confusing kid. Bewildered, Winry turned back to the studio. Darish's behavior had been completely unpredictable to her. He had been quiet one moment, but was storming off in the next. Winry couldn't help wondering if all boys his age were the same way. That wasn't to say she was an adult either. Winry herself was only 15 after all. Winry's childhood friend Edward was incredibly expressive with his emotions, and was always straightforward. Sorry, I just had to laugh at that blatant lie. She tried to remember what he had been like at Darish's age. When he was 12, Edward had begun to carry heavy burdens. He had lost his arm and leg and become a state alchemist. However, as far as she could recall, Edward had been as straightforward 12 years old as he was now. Work that day didn't end until 7 in the evening. Take care, waved the last customer. Sure thing. I'll see you again next week, Winry waved as the customer walked down the darkening streets. Then she began her usual closing routine. She carefully cleaned and oiled all the tools that had been dirtied by the day's work, then brought a crate of materials inside before pulling down the shutters. Whenever she still had work that needed to be completed before the next day, she would work overtime with Garfield, but she was free on this particular day. After she finished putting away everything in the studio, Winry opened the toolbox she had brought with her from Risenbull. It contained a wrench, a screwdriver, a hammer, and a ruler, all tools that she had used since she was small. Winry used a piece of cloth to carefully polish them. Ever since arriving in Rush Valley and gaining access to the most convenient and easy-to-use tools on the market, she didn't have as many opportunities to use the things she had grown up with. Regardless, the tools embodied many memories for her, and taking care of them was an essential part of bringing her day to a close. There, all clean. Winry brandished the polished instruments, bringing them toward the lamp. After taking a few moments to admire the way they gleamed in the light, she placed them back in her toolbox. And now we're finally done. After giving the furnace a final check to make sure the fire was out, she turned off the lamp. The door at the back of the studio was opened up to the stairs leading to the second floor, as well as the ground floor kitchen. Behind the sink was a small room. That was where Winry found Garfield and two men sitting at a round table, covered by a white lace cloth, drinking tea. Mr. Garfield, I finished up in the studio, Winry reported. Thanks for your hard work, Garfield replied. He had been elegantly enjoying his tea, his pinky pointing out as he held his teacup. But at Winry's announcement that their workday had officially come to an end, he placed the cup back on its saucer and gave her a smile. The teacup was decorated with beautiful roses, and a matching teapot rested on the table, which was surrounded by matching metal chairs, the backs and armrests of which were shaped into delicate, swirling curves. The entire setup seemed a bit feminine for 3 men at tea time, but it fit right with the Atelier Garfield aesthetic. Hey, Winry, care for a cup? Inquired a young man in a friendly tone, as he turned his chair to drape his arm over the back. His name was Henrik, and he was the second youngest mechanic after Winry among their work acquaintances. Good work today, the other man said. He was bearded and around Garfield's age, or slightly older. His name was Weiss, and both he and Henrik were both fellow mechanics running automail shops in Rush Valley. Good evening, Mr. Henrik and Weiss, Winry greeted the two familiar faces with a smile before plopping into the chair that Weiss had pulled out for her. Here, for your hard work. Henrik handed her a cup of tea he had poured from the pot, validating Winry with a reward for her efforts. Thank you, Winry said. The pot had likely been cooled, because the tea that filled the cup to the brim was cold to Winry's touch. One mouthful and the chilled liquid seeped into her, soothing her overheated and exhausted body. Winry loved spending time with her fellow mechanics and basking in a shared sense of satisfaction after a day of hard work. She exhaled and let herself just listen to the other three chat amongst themselves. Their conversation flowed between politics, economics, and the general state of the world. But when there was a pause, Garfield turned to Winry and said, Oh, I just remembered. How did the talk with Darish about his automail go? Ah, about that. Also, the music is gone forever. Just kidding, it's still here. This DJing thing is so fun. Ah, about that. At the question, Winry drew the cup away from her lips and let out a small sigh. He actually left before we could get anywhere. Excuse me. I'm scared the next song's gonna be so loud. just... Oh, I love this song. It's one of the saddest songs in O3. Anyway, Winry caught Garfield up on what happened while explaining the situation to their fellow mechanics, who had missed the entire incident. And then I asked if he had any requests for his automail, but he didn't give me any answers, and I was kinda stuck. Oh my, I see, Garfield said. He had been deep in conversation with one of his regulars when Darish left, and had missed out on how it had all ended. He arched a single brow, surprised. He seemed like such a well-behaved child. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. I asked him to come again tomorrow, but I'm sorry. They were running a business, and it was Winry's job to earn the trust of their clients and contribute to the shop. She regretted that she hadn't managed to achieve that. Garfield, however, didn't seem bothered, and sipped his tea. There's no need to apologize, my dear. That boy, Darish, he didn't say he was going to another shop, did he? No, Winry answered. Well then, I don't see how anything has changed, Garfield said. You're still in charge of him. Until he gives you a clear rejection, all you need to worry about is how to make a lovely piece of automail for him. That's 2 pages, not 1. Anyway. Weiss had been listening in silence, but he began to stroke his beard. He asked Winry, Was the kid Darish Harling by any chance? Yes, that was his name, Winry said. Do you know him? Considering the number of people that were in Rush Valley, it was unusual to hear that a fellow mechanic had encountered the same customer. Right as Winry was being struck by what a coincidence it was, Weiss let out a groan. If he's who I think he is, he might end up moving on to another shop right away. You think so? Winry asked. Darish's mood during their entire interaction had confused Winry, but this had only added to the bewilderment. Ah, sorry, I didn't mean to make you worry, Weiss waved his hands, trying to reassure Winry, as her face scrunched up deep in thought. That kid's come by my place, too. I think it was around a week ago. He came to get automail made, brought his mother too, but he didn't seem too keen on it. Apparently the place that made his current prosthetic was of the nasty sort. Didn't bother taking proper measurements, and didn't provide any follow-up care either. That's so, Winry frowned. Regardless of whether it was automail or just regular prosthetic, it was crucial to gather precise measurements to make something that fit a client's body. Follow-ups were also essential in making adjustments to suit the client's growth and lifestyle. Prosthetics created from sloppy plans put strain on the wearer and risked warping their skeletons. In extreme cases, they could even cause paralysis. It seems like that's why his legs started to hurt immediately after he got his prosthetic. Probably still distrust mechanics as a result. He was civil while his mother was around, but as soon as he was alone with me, he stopped cooperating. I had other jobs and I couldn't sit there with the kid, and after a while it was clear we weren't getting anywhere. He ended up leaving up for a different shop. I see, Winry said. She had thought Darish's prosthetic seemed wrong for his size, but apparently it had never fit, even when it had been brand new. Winry couldn't blame him for hating prosthetic mechanics if he had been dealing with years of leg pain. Winry recalled the awful-looking bruises on Darish's leg and tightened her grip on her teacup. As a member of the same industry, she simultaneously felt guilt and simmering outrage at the thought of a fellow mechanic treating a client so carelessly. Winry wasn't alone in her anger. Garfield refilled all of their cups, and when he spoke, it was with quiet rage. Some people are careless with their work like that. They're less mechanics and more like corrupt business people who only care about profit. They know that people looking to buy automail usually have plenty of money prepared, so sometimes they'll drag them into their shops and force them to sign contracts, or they'll sell shoddy, overpriced automail. They won't provide any proper maintenance, but will take the money. They're just horrid. Garfield was usually imperturbable, but the sudden rant betrayed his unusually strong feelings about the matter. It seemed these people truly disgusted him. Recently, people like that have set their sights on Rush Valley itself. We've been seeing more of them, swarming like hyenas whenever they smell money. What absolutely dreadful people, Garfield said, touching his hand daintily to his face and heaving a deep sigh. Weiss's agreement with Garfield's assessment was clear on his face, grimacing as though he tasted something terribly bitter. Absolutely. They're awful pests. Wow. I just realized the video's over, so I'm going to restart the video. We've been here for an hour, guys. Wow. I'm actually feeling my voice getting tired, so I think I'm going to finish this chapter, which is in a few pages. two chapters per stream. I think that's pretty legit. So let's go with the home stretch. Yeah, it's already been an hour. I might still hang out, but yeah, my voice is pretty tired with reading. Anyway, absolutely, they're awful pests. They've even dragged proper businesses into their mess, trying to rip us off when they sell materials, too. Not like we can say anything either, or we risk getting everything burned to the ground. Burned to the ground? Winry frowned when she heard the unsettling phrase. Henrik slammed his empty cup onto a crate with a bit more force than necessary. He looked pained as he began to explain. Do you know that big, empty plot of land by the station? A buddy mechanic of mine used to have a shop there. They had a real strong sense of justice, too. They had a real strong sense of justice, too, and always stood up to those snakes. But then, in the middle of the night, there was a minor arson incident. The hustlers who had been antagonizing my buddy got arrested almost immediately, but in the end, there wasn't enough evidence to convict them, and the guys were acquitted. My buddy couldn't even get reparations for the store, and it went belly up in the end. Winry remembered the location of the weightlifting competition she'd seen on the day she arrived for her apprenticeship. She hadn't realized that the empty lot among the rows of stores and residences was what was left after a fire and bankruptcy. Can't we expose them? Can't the clients report to the military police that they've been tricked? Winry asked. She had heard rumors about crooked business people, but had never personally been involved with with ones like her peers had described. The three shook their heads in unison, chiming in. It's just not possible. Even if a client claims they were threatened, the contract still has their signature. The military police can't do anything unless they happen to be present to witness the actual blackmailing. They've been banding together recently, which has made everything worse. I can't stand how it's affecting the mood in town. It really is dreadful, Garfield voiced his displeasure alongside his friends. The many terrorist incidents nationwide meant there was a high demand for prosthetics, and Rush Valley, blessed by the ore-rich mountains that surrounded it, was flourishing in part due to that violence. Of course, no mechanic wanted a world with endless conflict, but so long as there were those who needed prosthetics, the engineers wanted a safe environment where they could provide the best products possible. But what was perhaps the most important to the mechanics of Rush Valley was their pride in the technological developments that had resulted from their friendly rivalry. The crooks who tarnished the reputation of the city were also trampling on the engineers' collective sense of humor. I know it's difficult to ignore. And loud music time. Hush. Hush, little music, don't you cry. Mommy's gonna finish reading time. Okay. I know it's difficult to ignore, but it's best not to get involved with the likes of them. Winry, if you see any sketchy shops, promise me you'll never go near them, Garfield said, uncharacteristically serious. Of course, Winry responded sincerely. Anyway, all we can do is show them in our own way, that we're not going to take things lying down. Let's show them what we got, Garfield harrumphed before crossing his burly arms firmly across his chest. That's the plan, and we're bringing in a brand new weapon for that, Henrik said coyly while passing Winry several sheets of paper. Upon seeing the words emblazoned on the diagrams, Winry's eyes widened. I know that! It's that huge new power tool, right? It was a brand new industrial-sized machine, produced by a certain famous brand. The machine, designed to both cut and polish, came with a large assortment of interchangeable blades. The blades, polishing discs, and other components were all incredibly powerful, and all of them were of higher quality than those available on the machinery currently in their shop. We use a variety of materials based on what the client needs when we make auto nail, don't we? Well, when the machines we use have limitations, we can't work with as many materials. So we decided to take the leap and ordered the latest model. The three of us, along with a few other people, pulled together our funds, her fellow engineers explained. That's amazing, Winry exclaimed. Purchasing the latest machinery through pooled investments was something that could only happen in Rush Valley. By bringing in this machine, they would be able to work with greater range of metals and make a greater variety of automail. Winry was filled with awe as she stroked the image of the machine on the paper with her fingertips. Even though it's equipped with so many functions, there's not a single wasteful element to it, Winry said. This is the brand with the president who started up his own company with the motto, the most important part of crafting is good tools, right? He used to be a craftsman himself, and when he was 10, he became a legend by fixing a train. Oh, I'm sorry. I got a little too worked up there, didn't I? Winry giggled and tried to play it off, sticking her tongue out sheepishly. When it came to automail, she retained even the most minute bits of trivia. Garfield and the others blinked at her. They shared looks as though asking each other, "Did you know that?" The men shook their heads at each other. "I read about his ideologies once in the paper," Winry continued. "He said, if the screws say nothing and the cogs are silent, there's nothing more than clumps of metal. But if the right person handles them and listens close, the screws speak and the cogs sing. And that, then, is when the automail starts to gleam with brilliant glory." Oh, isn't that so romantic? With the diagrams pressed to her chest and her eyes closed dreamily, Winry was the embodiment of an automail nerd. Garfield and the others desperately tried to stifle their chuckling. Paying no heed to the fact that he was smearing his lipstick, Garfield kept his hand clamped over his mouth until Winry was done waxing poetic about the machine. Then he told her, "Yes, so we've decided to set up the machine here, in our shop. Winry, dear, you'll be in charge of taking care of it. Of course, you can use it whenever you'd like as well." "Really?" Winry snapped out of her reverie at the unexpected words. Because she was still inexperienced, she hadn't imagined getting permission to personally handle the machine. Remembering that it was both the latest model, not to mention expensive, made her slightly nervous, but her joy overruled her trepidation. "Oh no, what should I do? Just thinking about it's making my hands shake. Oh, what should I make?" Winry's eyes sparkled as she danced around, and the men were no longer able to hold in their laughter. "Winry, you never change," said Henrik. "Considering you've got such a passionate apprentice, it won't be long until the studio's called Atelier Winry," said Weiss. "Well, my goodness, you really went there. I've still got some fight in me yet," Garfield countered. Ignoring the laughter around her, Winry once again turned her gaze to the machine and the paper. On the paper, excuse me. She wanted to use this to make Darnish the best automail possible. She wanted to teach him that prosthetics didn't have to cause pain, that they could be part of his body, and that they could grant him freedom of mobility. If she could accomplish these goals, perhaps, that would put Darish at ease, so he could have faith in prosthetics. Winry began drafting the blueprints for for Darish's automail in her head. And that is the end of chapter 2. I'm gonna do a quick breeze ahead. I want to see how many Oh, you know what? I think there's a table of contents in the very beginning. Silly Manami. Oh wow. So there's 6 chapters to this story with Winry. But there's also an epilogue, and I think an extra story. Oh, I want to read the 3rd chapter, though. How long's the 3rd chapter? Oh. Screw it. I'm gonna read the 3rd chapter. I knew this was gonna happen. I knew this was going to happen. Real quick, though, here's what I'm gonna do to compromise. I'm going to take a quick BRB. I'm gonna rehydrate my water and myself, and I will come back and read the 3rd chapter. Because then, next time, I can finish Winry's story. Make it 2 parts. Okay, I'll be right back, everybody. Maybe not a long enough break, but I wanted to get back to reading. Okay, here we go. Get right into it. Okay. Chapter 3. A giant mistake. Uh-oh. Here we go! Okay. Several days later, Winry enthusiastically headed to her desk so she could use her afternoon break to work. Since Garfield was attending to a regular in the studio, she was on her own for lunch. So the best bolt for this joint would be... Winry trailed off as she scrutinized a clipboard in her left hand while holding a sandwich in her right. Then she stared down at a giant sheet of paper spread out on her desk. A breeze wafted in from an open window and tousled her hair, but that didn't even register in her mind. I need a 12-centimeter wire to fit the joint, so maybe that'll work with a number 58 screw? She took a bite from her sandwich. Her pencil noisily scribbled across the surface of the schematics for the automail she was designing for Darish. Maybe I could use a 58 screw over here, too, Winry contemplated, with a piece of bread still between her lips. The blueprint rustled as Winry flipped up the right edge of it. There was, unsurprisingly, another automail blueprint right below. Unlike the blueprints for Darish, which were still relatively clean, the bottom blueprint had slapdash notes scrawled all over it. There were also traces of bygone writing that she had previously erased. As she was writing the number of the screw in a corner of the schematics for Darish, there was a knock at her door of her room. "Winry, I'm coming in." "Oh my, that's not proper of you," Garfield scowled when he opened the door to see Winry with the sandwich still in her mouth as her pencil raced across the paper. "Now that's not a ladylike way to behave." "Sorry." Winry quickly removed the sandwich from her mouth and apologized. "For being so cute, you act so crudely sometimes," Garfield said. To gasp, more automail blueprints. I really like this story with Winry, it's so cute. Is there a way I can access the web? I sure can. Okay. Because there's a picture. Oh. Is this webcam plugged in? It sure isn't. We're gonna hear a little Windows bing bing boom. Or maybe we won't. It's okay if we don't. I mean, whatever. I just want to show you this picture really quick. Oh, not Elgato. Not what I want. Oh, did we get it? I think we got it. Okay. So. Hello, stream! But yeah, here's a little picture. Drawn by Miss Arakawa herself. But, that's what we're doing right now. It's cute. Anyway. A very impromptu thing. Yeah, pan reveals. Oh my god. Stream reveals. Anyway. It's just that both my hands were occupied, Winry said. Whatever am I going to do with you? Garfield gave her a put-upon smile. Hee Winry laughed to herself in embarrassment. So, there's an errand I was just about to ask of you if you could run. Oh, drawing up schematics, are we? Garfield said. He had walked into the room and peeked in the in-progress design on the desk. So, these are the ones for Darish, then? Yes, I'm still figuring out the basic setup, but I'm going to ask if he has specific requests, and then I'll draw up my plans based on that, Winry said, then stopped to take in a deep breath. But he hasn't come by. Darish hadn't come back to the shop since the first visit. He hadn't turned down her services, and she hadn't heard of him going to another shop, so she had no idea what to do. Right. I suppose you can't seal the deal then, Garfield said, troubled as he pinched his chin. If Darish did formally request automail from them, they would need to procure the parts to make it. Knowing that, getting an answer from him sooner rather than later would make things easier. After they both pondered over what to do for some time, Garfield suddenly perked up and proposed. Right, I know. That new tool I told you about is coming in tonight. What? Is it really? Winry brightened, a smile forming on her face at the news of the highly anticipated arrival. Yes, so how about you be the one to go to Darish? You're going to make this automail using the new tool we're getting, aren't you? Garfield gently tapped the schematics with his fingertip, but smiled knowingly and murmured, Looks like you put the cart before the horse. Winry had been drawing up her plans with the assumption she would use the new tool from the outset. Feeling embarrassed when she realized he had seen through her, she took the shopping list from him. Then I'll take you up on that. I'll stop by Darish's hotel while I'm out. Darish had told her where he was staying while she made up his chart, and she knew it would be easy enough to stop by. If you could, I'd love for you to make him some wonderful automail that'll show him not all the mechanics are terrible. Oh, Looks like you've selected the materials you're using. Let's see what you have here. Let me take a look, Garfield said, with a kind look on his face as he picked up the plans in order to peruse the materials list. As he did that, another blueprint fell down from behind it. Oh? What's this? Garfield asked, looking at the plans Winry had been perpetually writing up, erasing, then rewriting. Is this for Darish too? Looks like it's for a kid around his age. As Garfield read the figures that were recorded on the sheet, it seemed he had deduced that the measurements were for a person around the size of a 12-year-old. No, those are for a friend, Winry said. If Edward ever learned he had been mistaken for a 12-year-old, he would go on a fiery rampage. Winry could almost hear him shouting, "Don't you dare call me short!" She unintentionally let out a giggle. She could practically see Alphonse exasperated and holding Edward back while saying, "Wait, Ed, calm down!" Ah, so that's the childhood friend of yours you said you were making automail for. You really are putting a lot of thought into it. He must be special to you. No, it's not anything like that. Special? When Garfield said that word, Winry lost her cool, though she didn't know why. As Garfield watched Winry suddenly go from calm to panic, he put his hand to his mouth and uttered, "Oh my, now this childhood friend of yours couldn't happen to also be your sweetheart, would he?" "Not in the least bit!" Winry exclaimed. "You're so worked up. That's so precious. It's not like that. There's no way I'd go out with a little runt like him." As she shook her head and ardently denied it, Winry felt her cheeks getting flushed from how worked up she had gotten. "I need to go run the errands," Winry said, as she dashed out of the room, feeling an odd emotion she couldn't quite understand. She was supposed to be angry, but for some reason she felt embarrassed. "Have a nice trip." "Really, just can't admit it, can she?" Garfield said, waving his hand delicately and breaking into a smile as he watched Winry stomp down the stairs. "It's not anything like that," Winry in denial. Yup. Hold on, I wanted to... Alright. Put my fingers where this chapter ends. So we got... How many pages we got? Not that many. 16 pages. Okay. Seriously, I can't believe Mr. Garfield! After leaving the atelier, Winry walked briskly down a road shimmering from the heat haze. Since Winry and the Elric brothers were childhood friends, she was regularly teased about Edward, though she would bluntly deny there was anything between them whenever the subject came up. She couldn't understand why, but the earlier exchange had shaken her to an extent that was surprising even to her. However, it was true that the thought of the Elric brothers tenaciously working toward their goals somewhere right now brought out her urge to work harder too. The two brothers who inspired her courage were really special to her in a way that couldn't be summarized by childhood friendship. "But they're just friends. It's always been that way, ever since we were small," she said, almost as though she were trying to convince herself of something. Winry walked even faster, as if to shake off the strange agitation that had overtaken her right as, "Wah!" she heard a child cry from a side street. Winry stopped in her tracks and looked over in that direction. I wonder what's going on. She switched directions and peered around the corner to find that a small crowd had gathered in front of the street stall. A small girl sat at its center. "Letty!" Winry exclaimed. The sobbing girl was Darish's little sister. It seemed she had taken a tumble and brought down a shelf of merchandise with her. The metal scraps from a salvage of some sort or other had scattered and fallen into the sand. "You think you could just waltz over here and break my precious merchandise?" I said precious. "Precious merchandise?" yelled a large, menacing man who appeared to be the owner of the stall. "I can't believe anyone would pick a fight with a small child," someone in the crowd said. "That guy set up shop at another street yesterday and picked fights then too," said another. Despite their commentary, the onlookers only shot sympathetic glances from afar when faced with the red-hot threat the large man posed. They offered no help. "The parts you just broke cost 180,000 cents. You go and get that money from your parents," the man roared. "Excuse me!" Winry quickly threw herself in front of Letty just as the man seemed like he was about to raise his hand against the girl. "Oh, Winry!" Letty's eyes opened wide in surprise, but then she started sobbing even louder, almost as though in relief at Winry showing up to help. Winry stroked the sobbing girl's heaving back and faced down the man. The man loomed over Winry with a dubious look as she stood in his way. "Who the hell are you? You the kid's sister or something? Aren't you ashamed?" How could you threaten a little kid like her? Winry said indignantly, not backing down despite the man's far taller stature. What are words? Letty shouldn't have broken the merchandise, but he had gone too far in phrasing things as though he was going to exhort her. But the man didn't even seem apologetic. Ha! He snorted. I'm the one who's the victim here. My merchandise was broken. What are you going to do about that? As though to show her mistake in her face, the man thrust one of the broken wares at Letty. It appeared to just be an automail piece that started at the elbow, judging by the five-finger-like appendages that flopped around. I just said to stop that! Winry stood in front of Letty, hiding the girl behind her back, but when her eyes fell on the automail, she cocked her head to the side. Did you really break this, Letty? She asked, unable to hide her doubt, which made a grin break over the man's face. Ain't that what I've been saying? Then how about you cough up the dough to cover the price tag, huh? Are you sure it wasn't broken from the start? What did you... The man choked up. Thought so. Salvaging and reselling automail itself was a respectable trade. As long as the automail was still functioning, it could be tuned up and reattached. If it was broken, it could be disassembled for parts. The exorbitant price the man was demanding was well within a range that should have guaranteed functioning automail. However, after looking at the automail in the man's hands and the parts scattered on the ground, Winry could see that they were pieces of junk that had been broken all along. That automail wouldn't be operational even if you attached the parts all the parts on the ground to it. The driving mechanism's metal clasp is crushed, and the joints are so old that they're rusted. Considering all that, don't you think you're charging a bit too much for it? Winry said. Her assessment would have been impossible without a close inspection for most inexperienced mechanics, but the piece's condition hadn't escaped Winry. But she still damaged my merchandise! It's filled with sand because she knocked all over the shelf! Then we can solve that by cleaning it. A satisfied, bold smile broke out on Winry's face as she pulled out an array of tools that filled both of her hands. The man's eyes opened wide in shock. He was probably wondering who this 15-year-old girl was that she regularly carried a whole set of tools on her person. Letty and the onlookers who observed the course of events from afar could only watch as Winry's adroit hands moved. Winry was showered in stares as she snatched the automail from the man's hands, unscrewed the casing, and using a screwdriver, swept away at the grit that had worked its way inside. Next, she rolled her shopping list into the shape of a thin straw and blew out the sand that had collected. She slotted the scattered parts into the appropriate places. As a finishing touch, she substituted the bolt of the driving mechanism, which had been crushed from the start, with another part that wouldn't obstruct the automail's functions. There! I don't think you can complain about that. It's fixed now, so make sure you take good care of it, Winry said. It probably hadn't taken her 10 minutes. She'd even polished the automail until it was gleaming before returning it to the dumbfounded man's hands. Then Winry led Letty down and out of the side road by the hand. After Winry's show of wonderful dexterity, the man and the spectators watched her leave with their mouths agape. Winry and Letty escaped the past ring of people and walked for a while before Winry had them stop at a small plaza with a fountain. She sat Letty down on the bricks that surrounded the fountain and used the sleeve of her jumpsuit to wipe away the traces of tears on Letty's face. That was scary, wasn't it? Winry said. But you're fine now. Where's your mom and brother? I lost them, Letty said, downcast. Where did you lose them? Let's find them together. Near the bank. Mom said she was getting money for the automail ready, but then Darish suddenly said he didn't need a new leg. I was waiting right next to them, but there were lots and lots of people, and I got separated. And then I fell down in front of that shop. Recalling the frightening ordeal brought tears to the girl's eyes again. I see. So that's what happened. At least you're fine now. Let's go find your mom and brother together, okay? Winry said as she stroked the girl's head. At that moment, someone called out Letty's name. When they looked over, Darish had just made his way into the plaza. Letty? Where were you? Oh, it's you. Darish, hobbling over on his crutch, noticed Winry was standing next to his sister. A suspicious look came over his face, and he said, Why are you here? I just happened to pass by right when she was getting into trouble with a man at a stall, Winry replied. She got in trouble? Darish scowled and looked down at Letty. There was obvious worry in his eyes and concern for his little sister. However, the next moment, the words that came out of his mouth were shockingly stern and in complete contrast to his expression. You dummy! Letty's shoulders trembled at her brother's unforgiving tone. You got in trouble? What did you do? He continued. But there were so many people, and they pushed me, and then I ended up in somewhere strange. That's why you shouldn't have come. This town is too busy. Hurry up and go home and stay with Dad. Letty sobbed at being shouted at, tears rolling down her face again, even though she just finished crying. Hey, you didn't have to say it like that, Winry said, as she put herself between the siblings, which made Darish, who had just been about to say something, purse his lips quietly. Something similar had happened at the studio, but this time, Darish had gone overboard with his biting words. Letty! Darish! They heard another voice from the edge of the plaza. Karen came running over, out of breath. Thank goodness! I heard people in the neighborhood saying that a girl who looked like you was crying, so your brother and I split up to find you. You weren't at the hotel, and I was so worried. What a relief! Apparently, Letty got herself in trouble, and then she supposedly saved her, Darish said brusquely. Brusquely? I hope that's how you pronounce that word. As Karen firmly hugged the bawling Letty. Well, thank you very much, Winry. I'm so sorry for the trouble, Karen said, and bowed her head to Winry. Not at all. That wasn't trouble in the slightest, Winry said, and quickly waved both her hands. But then Karen once again looked apologetic. And I'm sorry about Darish, too. You were right in the middle of talking about plans when he walked off, and left it at that. I'm sure that must have put you on the spot, because he's refused to come by again, right? I feel terrible asking you for this after causing you trouble, but regarding the automail, that's still... After investing time consulting so many shops only to have agreements fall through every time, Karen seemed worried that she would end up repeating the process with Winry. No, it's fine. I need to procure the parts soon, so it would be very helpful to move the conversation along. You're welcome to come back. I wouldn't turn you away. I see. What a relief, Karen replied, as a genuinely reassured smile formed on her face. Then shall we make a visit to the shop right away? What do you think, Darish? Like any parent, Karen was worried about her son's future. Despite Darish's reservations, she likely wanted him to get automail as soon as possible, even if it was just a day sooner. However, true to form, Darish fought her on it. I'm not going. He set himself up on his crutch again and turned around as though trying to shake himself free from his mother's gaze. Darish! Winry called to stop him, knowing that if she let him leave now, it would just be a repeat of their previous encounter. She wanted to nudge the conversation forward, even if only fractionally. Darish suddenly lost his balance and started to tumble to the right. Gah! His prosthetic leg had gotten caught in the stone pavement, and his crutch had fallen from his hand. That was close! Winry and Karen both instantly run to him and supported him together. Ouch! Darish's face twisted with pain while he was held up between their two sets of hands. The belt of his prosthetic had contorted and applied pressure to his thigh. His scars and bruises were exposed from where the belt had shifted. When Letty saw the painful scars, she stopped crying and wanted to help her brother too. Darish, she called in a hesitant voice, but he didn't even turn to look at her. All he did was click his tongue at her in annoyance. Let me take a sip of water really quick. Okay. Posture check. Thank you, Professor. Oh, and a head pat. You're spoiling me tonight. Okay. Okay. Karen, he needs his prosthetic reattached anyway, and we can talk about the automail here, so would you leave us alone for a bit? Winry cautiously proposed. Darish seemed annoyed just from Letty's presence. If they stayed in the same spot together, it was likely that he would say something awful to Letty and hurt her feelings again. Talking to Darish alone seemed to be the more prudent course of action at the moment. Karen hesitated for a bit, but she seemed to realize her son's irritation. She signaled agreement with her eyes, then bowed and left the plaza with Letty. Once they were alone, Winry lent Darish her shoulder and sat him down on the fountain's rim. Ouch! Darish's face contorted in pain. It seemed that the joint of his prosthetic might have scraped him. Winry kneeled directly onto the ground and placed her hands on Darish's right leg to carefully remove the prosthetic. Prosthesis. The bruises from the prosthesis had grown even larger when she had previously seen them. It looks like this leg is a bad fit. I really think you should replace it soon, she said, keeping her tone measured as she pushed the twisted belt back into place with the tips of her fingers and fixed the half-undone fastenings. Darish kept silent for a while as he rubbed his leg, but he eventually ground his teeth, seeming bitter. Damn it. If that carriage hadn't toppled over, this wouldn't be happening, he said, as he bit his trembling lip. Darish glared at the adjusted belt and metal fastenings for a moment, but then a weary look gradually overtook him. 2 years ago, the carriage that happened to pass by me fell over. I'm not sure if a wheel came off or if the horse got spooked, but what I do remember clearly is the cart coming down on me. As he haltingly spoke, his eyes seemed to look beyond his right leg into the empty air, as though he were searching for his long-gone limb. I got this prosthetic right after I lost my leg, but it just wouldn't fit right. My mom and dad told me it was their fault for not choosing a good shop and that they'd find me one that was actually good next time. They brought me to Rush Valley, but... Hey, did I tell you where we live? When he asked her that, Winry paused from her work and shook her head. No, where's that? It's even farther north than West City. That's a long way from here. Yeah. The country of Amestris was roughly circular. Rush Valley was in the south, and the town Darish came from was in the distant north. My dad's working from morning to night just to afford my automail fee and the living expenses. He told me to get the best engineer in Rush Valley to make one for me. My mom's planning for a long stay, and she said she wanted to go back home to get stuff, but... As Winry listened to Darish's pained voice while he spoke about his family, she understood what he was trying to say. That he felt guilty for the money they were spending. Despite that, Darish had still delayed getting his automail. As she realized the reason for that, Winry said out loud, You don't trust mechanics? Yeah, Darish answered. He was so sure that he hadn't hesitated to answer. Winry doubted she could easily overcome that distrust. Regardless of that, she carefully chose her words as she looked up at Darish. I think you must have been through terrible things with the prosthetic leg you have now. But you'll be much more mobile with automail that had been properly designed for you. You'd even be able to run and jump. The leg you have now is putting a strain on your body, but I'll be sure to make one that fits you perfectly, I promise. Darish stared back at Winry, looking serious. What would a leg that fits me perfectly be like? Huh? Is automail really that great? When Darish questioned her, Winry assumed he was showing interest and gave him an enthusiastic nod. She could go on forever about the benefits of automail, especially if doing so would restore Darish's trust in prosthetics in the slightest. That thought filled her with self-confidence. Automail needs to be adjusted several times for the wearer as they grow, but you'll have the flexibility to have any leg you want. Depending on the mix of metals, you'll be able to change its weight and properties. I even know someone who has weapons hidden in hers. What kind of leg would you like, Darish? I don't need it to be able to do anything special, he trailed off. So you want something simple? Since you seem like you're pretty active, what would you think of something that has a wide range of movement at the joint? And it might be good to make it out of sturdy materials that won't have, any give, even if something happens. If you don't like the leg, you could even switch it for a different one. Sounds like automail can do anything, Darish said, responding with something like a smile at Winry's purposefully bright tone before continuing. So then, could you make a leg the same as my original one? His voice became terribly cold and monotone. Oh, whoops, I read that before going terribly cold. Excuse me. So then, could you make me the same leg as my original one? His voice became terribly cold and monotone, and that smile turned resentful. He wasn't sneering exactly. His expression was too muted for that kind of act of malice. So I could have whatever leg I want, and I could switch it out just like that? Why is it that everyone talks about? It's not an automail leg I want. I just want my leg back. His gaze became filled with anger as he stared her down. His tone and what he was saying overpowered her. I lost consciousness while I was under the carriage. By the time I woke up, my leg was gone. I still can't believe it. But you, the doctors, and all the other mechanics just keep telling me there are other legs out there. You're all so full of yourselves, telling me that you can just make me a new one. He aggressively snatched away the prosthetic Winry held and threw it on the ground. The prosthesis Winry held and threw it on the ground. Tears welled up in his eyes. No leg's going to fit me like my original one. I can't just replace it. Don't you dare tell me I can just switch out my leg. Nothing's better than my original leg. Why don't you get that? His shoulders heaved from his ragged breathing. Even though he aggressively wiped away his tears, he couldn't stop crying. Big, wet tears splattered onto the ground. Darish took a deep breath, and then continued in a quivering voice. Letty's such a crybaby. She'll fall right over or get lost and sob on the spot. That's why I'd always run to her side and help her. I protected her. Darish, Henry said, frozen. She could only watch as his large tears welled up and spilled over. When we were coming to Rush Valley, I told Letty to stay home, but she came anyway. She followed me like she always does. But she can't keep doing that, not when I can't save her anymore. Winry at last realized the real reason why Darish was irritated with his little sister. He had been cold to Letty when he... Hello, loud music. Could we not? Thank you. He had been cold to Letty while she held his crutch because he was irritated at himself for being a burden. When he had heard she'd gotten caught up in trouble, he had looked worried even while shouting at her because he was angry at himself. There was no sibling rivalry between them. He was just frustrated that he wasn't able to protect her like he had in the past, and by how that reality had been forced on him. He sobbed as he said in an increasingly heated tone, I was proud of my leg. I knew I could trust my leg to be fast in taking me to her. There isn't any other leg like it. You didn't even know that, so don't tell me you can give me a leg better than my original one. His emotional outburst rendered Winry speechless. Back when Darish had run into Winry on the road, he hadn't been distracted by the weightlifting competition. He had been watching the other kids running freely. The reason why he'd been so absorbed in thought and forgotten to even say hello when he had come to the shop was because he had been preoccupied with memories of his original leg. After getting all his long pent-up feelings off his chest, Darish once again wiped his face. This time his tears stopped for good. To Winry, it felt as though it were the moment he fully closed off his heart, having given up hoping that anyone would understand him. Hello, loud music once again. Cut it off. Cut it off! Okay. We're almost done. Darish left Winry, who was still frozen on the spot, and moved over to his fallen prosthesis. He wordlessly put it on. He dragged his deadweight leg and left the plaza behind, his small form disappearing into Rush Valley's clamor. Even though Darish had left, his words echoed in Winry's mind. I can't believe I said something so insensitive, Winry said, turning pale and slumping onto her butt on the spot. Darish hadn't simply been distrustful of mechanics or the prosthetic leg that had hurt him. He had been wounded by everyone's insensitive attitudes as they enthusiastically boasted about their skills and focused solely on telling him the benefits of prosthetics. It was because he had such a hard time until now that she had wanted to give him the best automail there could be. Despite her intentions, Darish had only seen the many things she had said as dismissal of his original leg. What Winry should have done was try to understand Darish's feelings about losing his leg. She should have started by listening to him. Winry clenched her fists in the gravel, the sand crunching in her palms. I forgot to consider my client's feelings, she said. Winry's many customers floated into her head. There was Melia, who asked Winry to remove her automail for inspection. There was Cass, who had been worried about his automail's maintenance would change. About how his automail maintenance would change. Winry could think of all kinds of other examples. She had said so many things to so many customers like, this right here is a great part. If this doesn't work out, then I can adjust it for you. It'll hurt a little, but it'll heal up right away. Music back. Okay. She had done what she thought was the best in each circumstance, thinking it would satisfy her clients. But had it in actuality? Melia had looked worried, and Cass had been very hesitant until he had made a decision, hadn't he? They were anxious, but Winry took a deep breath as though she were trying to relieve herself of even a slight amount of the weight of the heavy emotions that burdened her. All she could manage was a faint, trembling gasp. In Risenbul, she hadn't had the means, knowledge, or materials she had access to now. Regardless of that, she could say with confidence that she had thrown her whole self into her work. She had regularly racked her brain, thinking about where someone's automail might hurt, and what concerns the wearer might have to ensure they would be happy. However, she had gradually replaced that care with new techniques, knowledge, and materials. Cut it off just like his leg. I'll see myself out. Professor. If Risen Bowl was flooded, would it be Risen Pool? Yeah, I guess it would, huh? Okay. Home stretch. Good 2-hour stream this. Okay. Excuse me. However, she had gradually replaced that care with new techniques, knowledge, and materials. Though none of those things could be used as substitutes, she had mistakenly believed she could compensate with whichever she had most of at the time. All she had seen was the joy of the things that had once been out of her reach, of introducing clients to materials she had never been able to procure before, and being able to do things that had been impossible for her in the past. Winry was aghast to find that she had been so focused on those things that she had lost the ability to do something that had once come to her so naturally. After slowly standing up, Winry forced herself to run her errands on heavy feet, then headed back to Atelier Garfield. She found the new electrical tool she had been impatiently waiting for had been delivered to the studio. As she looked at the brand new machine sparkling in the setting sun, she had mixed feelings. She had been so convinced that if she just had this tool and could create an incredible piece of automail, she would have had the key to making Garish happy. She was embarrassed for ever having such a silly thought. That's the end of chapter 3. That's a fun cliffhanger to leave us off on. Okay. Don't mind me, I'm gonna just end the stream and read the rest of the book tonight. Don't worry, I'll read it again for you guys later. I might not actually read it. But yeah, okay. So, that was the first 3 chapters of FullMetal Alchemist: A New Beginning. I guess I should be the person to say, I'm not sponsored, but you can buy this book, as well as the other 5 novels. They're like paperback novels, so I believe I had pre-ordered this book for like $12.99. They're little paperback books, they're not expensive. But, yeah, this is the 6th book of a hopefully ongoing series. So you could probably find all of them on Amazon. There's not 50 novels, Juicebox, don't... Aw, Zell, thank you so much! I'm surprised I haven't read the whole thing, too, because it actually delivered on, Tuesday. It actually came to Awakara. Juicebox, please. Yeah, I think that was a good 2-hour stream. We're almost at 2 hours. But yeah, if you like FullMetal Alchemist as much as I do, which is probably nobody, who could like FullMetal Alchemist more than me? Very few people. But yeah, I'm gonna find somebody to raid. That's the thing. These novels aren't even written. If I move over, you can actually see. Written by Makoto Inoue, and original story by Arakawa. This wasn't even... But that's what I like about it. It's literally... it's legally published fanfiction. And as we saw earlier, Arakawa even drew art for it, and I think that's the coolest thing. It gives me hope that maybe Arakawa will one day notice my fanfiction. I'm kidding. I was looking for somebody to raid, and I just totally forgot. Okay, hold on. Who we gonna raid on this Friday night? Anyone that likes it more than you probably tried human transmutation and cost their lives. Straight up, when I was younger, I actually, I went to the library, and I pulled out a bunch of alchemy books, and I was like, I'm gonna learn alchemy, because, okay, Conquer of Shambhala got my brain really, churning, of okay, maybe the FullMetal Alchemist world exists. And so, I drew transmutation circles in the driveway. Oh man, it's so good. Look, I'm cringe, so you don't have to. Period. Yeah, let's... Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll get into the spookies. We're gonna send the love over to Sir Johnny Jelly Jaw. For those of you who don't know him, he's a good ol' hootin' tootin' Country slime! So, yeah, no, he's absolutely a delight. He's currently, playing, Amnesia. That's why I was like, ooh, let's send everybody to get all spookified, right? But yeah, okay, so what's today? Friday? Hold on, because we didn't get a raid today, and that's okay, but I do feel obligated to throw at least one pizza raid. There you go. Happy Pizza Friday, everybody! I could have made you guys channel point redeem it, but that's okay. I gotta have at least one pizza raid on Pizza Friday, so hopefully all you guys had some pizza or will be having some soon. Tomorrow we'll be playing Respite. I will try to stream it, but with it happening like pretty much right after work. Don't be surprised if I don't. But Umbrant, do I have Umbrant here in my yeah, okay, Umbrant usually streams it. Do I have numbers? Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so go to Umbrant and Numbers' channels for Respite tomorrow if I'm not streaming it. But then also, oh hello, music. Jusaki and I will be back to playing Resident Evil 5 co-op on Sunday. So yeah, we got a full weekend lineup heading our way. Thank you guys though for hanging out with me for this fun storytime reading stream. I hope you had as much fun as I did. You know, anytime I do anything FullMetal Alchemist or Kingdom Hearts related, I'm having a good time. So, alright, we're gonna be saying hi to Johnny Jaw. Let him know he's been hit by a Manami tsunami. And yeah, I hope to see you guys tomorrow night for Respite. Until then, I'll see you on the flip side. Have a good night. Love you guys. Mwah. Bye.